I worked with Jake right here, Marshall, and Richard, and we worked with You Need a Budget, aka YNAB. Basically, what our project sponsor does that Josh kind of stole my thunder earlier was it's a budget app that lets you track your transactions and really reel in your debt and spending and kind of figure out a way to get a good financial safety net. I was my main role was really learning about YNAB and diving into it and getting figuring out the best way to get the most out of it so that we could implement it with Google Assistant. And so one of the things I did was I did 15 different online live workshops, really getting to know the people who did there's specific people that did the tests that got to know me because I did so many of them, usually many in a row. And so in that ability, I was able to really use the app and understand how my budget impacted, how I would interact with it if I spoke to it. All right, so give a little context on why YNAB is a little bit different than a traditional budget app like Mint. There's 4 rules. And so one is to give every dollar a job. And what that means is when you get $1 into your account every month, you want to assign it to an expense that you have. And as you do it over more months, you'll have a better idea of where your money is going to be going. Number 2 is to embrace your true expenses. So you're not paying the same bill every month for certain things, like for example car maintenance or gifts. So the idea is to put a little bit away each month so that you have money there when that time comes for the car to get fixed. Number 3, rolling with the punches. So we all live in Vermont. We probably all have high heating bills, but they're not so bad in the summertime. So when February comes around, the heating bill goes up, the electricity bill goes down. You can take the money you had budgeted for electricity, maybe that was an average, and roll it over to your heating. So that way you're not, so you kind of have an idea of where you're spending your money, and then you can allocate other money to other things like vacations and whatnot. And then the last rule is aging your money. And what that means is after you get better with budgeting and reducing your debt, your money will start to age as it sits in your account. And then you can start to plan in subsequent months. So you can start planning for future bills. So right now we're in August, but maybe you're starting to plan different bills in September. And you can start putting things away for retirement, vacation, new car, whatever. All right, so this is the problem that YNAB brought to us. And this was what we had. This is the exact same text that was on the project proposal that they gave to Josh. And quite simply, they wanted someone who was speaking to Google Assistant, and for you who don't know, it's the same as Alexa, same as Siri, to get their different category amounts, such as groceries, car maintenance, transportation, so that when they asked Google Assistant, it would return with an amount, whether it was if you're over budget, under budget, or equal budget. And to kind of talk to you more about it, I'm going to give it to Marshall.
Thank you. All right, so the first thing that we did to figure out what we wanted to do is we had several meetings with our partners at YNAB, including Buffy, who's in the back. Luckily for us, they had already implemented a voice activation integration with Alexa, so they had the data to let us know what their users really wanted and used. And in this case, the primary use that they were using it for was getting how much money was in one of their categories from their budget. So that's kind of what we ended up narrowing in our focus on. The limitations for this is we didn't have access to YNAB source code. We certainly don't have access to Google's source code. And so we were a middleware, so we're just kind of interacting with both sides and connecting them together. Luckily for us, both YNAB's API documentation and Google's documentation is extremely thorough and extremely helpful. Probably the majority of this project we worked on is doing a lot of research and learning about these guys. So in order to fix this problem, we created a Google action. In order to create this Google action, we use Dialogflow and Firebase. This entire tech stack is not something we worked with throughout the course of our boot camp, so it was a lot of fun just kind of getting in and learning a completely new system. So what is a Google Action? A Google Action is kind of like a little applet that extends the functionality of Google Assistant. So pretty much anyone can make these, and you upload them, and they have an entire database full of them, and you can just kind of use your Google Assistant and invoke one of them, and it'll work on your phone. One of the cooler ones that I found is basically text adventures. So you can do an entire text adventure on your phone just using voice activation. So in our case, what we were doing is we were taking that and using it to call off to YNAB's API and collect that data and send it back to the user. So I'm going to demo it for you now. This diagram just kind of shows you how it works, and I'll do it on the phone. Okay, Google, talk to YNAB.
Okay, here's the test version of YNAB.
Welcome to You Need a Budget. Here we go. What category balance can I get for you today?
How much is my groceries category?
The current balance of your groceries category is overspent by $110. Can I do anything else for you? If not, you can say I'm done.
How much is in my fitness category?
The current balance of Fitness Flexed Biceps is $137. Anything else? Just ask for it or say I'm done.
I'm done.
Age that money.
So in order to get all of this to work, we took advantage of Google's machine learning. So what happens is we talk to Google Assistant and we use our invocation. And in this case, you can say something like, talk to YNAB or ask YNAB. This gets sent off to Google Assistant. Google Assistant has an entire database full of their different actions. It uses machine learning to figure out which one it wants, and then it sends us over to us in Dialogflow. In this case, what happens is it invokes our welcome intent. An intent is kind of like a function. It allows us to pass information back and forth and do all the fun stuff. So in this case, all this welcome intent is doing is just passing back the greeting and prompting the user for more information. So then it goes back to the user, and the user then sends another intent. In this case, how much is in my groceries category? Again, sent back. In this case, the intent is something different. It's our get budget intent. This is then sent over to Firebase in our webhook. This then fetches the data from the YNAB API, collects it, puts it in that, and sends it back to us. And voila, you've got your data, and it's wonderful. In order to get all of this to work, we had to do a lot of training. It's kind of what you have to do with machine learning. So we would take a bunch of different versions of saying, how much is in my budget? What's available to spend? Or you can even just say the category name, like water, and it'll tell you what your water category is. In order to parse the information and get that going, and so we actually have the values that we want to use to get back to the user. I'm going to pass this off to Richard, and he'll tell you more about that.
Great, thank you, Marshall. So, our capstone probably actually had the smallest amount of code that a capstone can have. A lot of our logic and our work is actually in Dialogflow, but once Dialogflow has done its job, then we actually need to send that information off to our code to get back meaningful information. So here's an example of a phrase that we have in a development environment. It's, I spent $20 at Mike's Pizza on dining out for my checking account. And that's all the information you would need to go onto the website and make a transaction. So here there are 4 important parts of information: an amount, a payee, category name, account. Great, have everything I need. That should be really easy. I'll just send it along, but I need something completely different to actually talk to the YNAB database. So you may notice an amount, it exists. There's been some math done, that's fine. The payee is Mike's Pizza. Great, that one's easy. I don't actually have a category ID or an account ID in this speech. So now we need to actually go to the YNAB API and get that information so that we can have a meaningful transaction here. So, show of hands, how many people are not coders? Don't do any coding. I'm going to show code.
Yeah!
I had a pause for applause. I don't know. So I'm just going to walk you through a really quick example here. So Dialogflow recognizes this and says they want to make a transaction. I'm going to trigger their intent. So this is our make transaction intent. This is a function we wrote. So basically what's getting passed in here are the amount, the payee, that category, and the account name. So that's great. Working with the YNAB API, they actually have a library. So instead of having to build kind of complicated looking messages back and forth, they've simplified it down to a few methods. And conveniently, when a user logs in, they're actually assigned an access token. That means after the first time they've logged in, they don't need to keep doing that. You actually notice Marshall didn't even have to. He was already logged in. And that information is actually stored by Dialogflow. So if anyone in here has ever made network requests, you should always catch your errors. Come talk to me about not doing that. I'll tell you a story. So this is a try catch. This basically means that if we go to get this data and something goes wrong, our app won't just crash. We're going to catch that error. We can give the user back some kind of meaningful information. Tell them to try again later. For me, I want to hear my error spoken to me, and then I kind of just want it to tell me that I did good. Because now I'm in the error and I'm ish. I did good-ish. So our first step is actually give me all the account data that you have on this user. So basically we're going into the YNAB database, think of that as kind of a library, and we're going to hit an endpoint, which is essentially a book. It has the information we're looking for, but it's also going to have a lot of other information in it. So this is kind of what comes back. Things aren't even expanded, and I don't need that. I just want ID and name. Just give me that for what I'm doing now. So I'm going to come back into the code. I have all that information now, all that account data. And now I'm going to take all that account data, drill down into it to get to the actual accounts, and then I'm going to look at this array, and I'm going to say, okay, I don't care about everything that's in there. It's probably important, but not to me. Just give me the name and give me the ID. That's the list that I want. And we do this so that we have this account list now. If we need to come back to search it, we have a smaller object. This is just more efficient for us to search through on subsequent rounds. And then lastly, now that I have this list of accounts, I know their names, I know their IDs, now we can actually use a search function, and we're just going to give it the account that the user said, and this list of accounts. And if that account exists in there, it's just going to send me back the ID. And now Dialogflow is this convenient conversation object I mentioned. Well, it turns out we can store information in there too. And that allows us to actually pass information throughout the conversation, kind of through our intents, basically passing parameters to other functions. So now you can imagine I have a checking account, I have a category ID, I can probably get, or I have an account ID, I can get a category ID pretty much the same, do a little math on the amount, I have Mike's Pizza, and now actually all I have to do is again use the YNAB API library and say create this transaction, I want it in my default budget, and here's your data. You send that off, and when it all works well, it appears. There's a reason this is just a screenshot. It is actually far more complicated. There are many ways users can speak this sentence, and many different variables in here. And there are things I did not ever expect to see while doing this, and Jake is the one that had to deal with a lot of this. So I'm going to pass this off to him.
All right. With that, let's talk about some bugs. So our search function that queried the YNAB API, it looked for exact matches for category and account names. And this is good. So for instance, if you have similar names such as work supplies and work food, it would be bad if it returned partial matches. So this is a good thing. But there was a problem. If users use special characters in their budget names, it would not return, as Google cannot parse special characters in speech. So I dove into the exciting world of regular expressions. So these are for those of you who aren't familiar with regular expressions, they're sequences of characters that define a search pattern, the results of which you can run any number of manipulations on. So our solution for the special character problems was we set it to only include alphanumeric characters and spaces. And it worked, or so we thought. If you've never seen a regular expression, this is what it looks like. There's the regular expression for ISO 8601 date format. So then the folks at YNAB informed us that many users loved to put emojis in their category. I thought this would be alright, except that when our search function queried the YNAB API, it returned the emoji characters as their Unicode values. So for instance, the Tears of Joy emoji is represented as U plus 1F602, and our original search function would remove the plus sign, and then we'd get back U1F602, which makes no sense, so our search function wouldn't find it. Luckily, regular expressions allow you to remove ranges of Unicode character values. So I found all the different ranges for the emoji characters, and I blacklisted them in our search function. But since our app returns the string literal of category and account names, you can still see your emojis in the app, and in fact, Google will even read them out to you. And then the other thing I implemented was I created a webhook for no input. So if a user calls our app and they provide no further input, so for instance, if they accidentally said YNAB and it opened up their app, or they wanted YNAB but they aren't sure how to use it, so they just don't say anything, we give them 3 hints and then it closes. Google assumes that they're no longer engaged.
Thank you, Jake. So we just want to go over really quick some of the takeaways from working with this tech stack. If you ever have a chance to have developers as your client, they are fantastic. Buffy and Brady help to laser focus us and give us a realistic scope. You can only imagine what we wanted the app to do when we sat down, knowing literally nothing about how to do it. Always work with developers. It was also really interesting. We can go into Dialogflow. We can work with machine learning, and we don't have graduate degrees in the field. This is something that I don't think any of us thought was possible, and maybe it's just becoming possible. For those of you familiar with GitHub, version control, it's great. Branching, merging, you can always revert back. Their version control is awesome. Dialogflows is in beta, which means save often and export your files. Another interesting one, GitHub, we're all used to kind of working as groups in there. You get your branch, you merge back in if it all works. Dialogflow, their workflow is not actually made for a group. So when we'd write code, and then if we wanted to test it, we had to deploy it to Firebase, which was our server, and Dialogflow would use that code, and we'd talk to it. But that meant if I pushed up code to test if it worked, I'd overwrite Marshall's code that he just pushed up, which would overwrite Jake's and overwrite Eric's. So a lot of our experience was actually figuring out how a workflow in Dialogflow works. Spoiler, just make a lot of them, and you won't interfere with each other. My personal favorite, if you like debugging with console.log, you haven't lived until Google Assistant has read your error to you over about 2.5 minutes. I literally had an object read the entire way down from the Burlington Code Academy classroom up here, and I could take out my computer and it was still talking. It's amazing. The future for this Google action in particular, we'll actually be talking again to YNAB on Monday, to their tech team. They're going to take it in-house. I think we'll actually be continuing to develop it, probably even over this weekend, and probably over the next couple weeks. They'll be taking it in-house. They have a team of internal alpha testers. Google Actions allows you to do that with 20 people. After that, you can do a beta test with the deploy, and they have a group of early access YNAB users that they want to target for that. And then, hopefully, given you don't even have to download it, hopefully you'll have your Google Assistant, or you'll have YNAB integration on your Google device soon. So if you have a YNAB account, maybe every couple days, just see if, talk to YNAB Dialogflow, their training in particular, come break our app, because it's actually fantastic to watch how it breaks and how we fix it. That's actually a really interesting part. So yeah, feel free, come ask us about all the things we talked about, and we'd like to thank all of you for coming out tonight, family and friends for support, and the Burlington Code Academy for giving us this chance. And thank you, Buffy, for making us learn an entirely new tech stack.